Just a quick introduction. My name is Susan Lindecky, and this space is called the Vestex Lab. We is basically building up an ecosystem in Brisbane for blockchain, AI, fintech, and proptech, and hopefully we'll get into robotics as well. And I just want to welcome everyone tonight and just say, well, and thank you for Thomas for hosting the event here. If any one of you got some any further questions afterwards about the space, please come talk to me. And then just quickly, in terms of safety as well, so we've got obviously the stairs going through down and that you can access. Also, if you go around the white in the middle, there's some more access escape, fire escape and stairs that you can go down there. And there's tea and coffee and water for everyone with refreshments afterwards. Okay, enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much, Susan. Yeah, thanks very much for coming on tonight, and Susan for letting us host here. Because we have a few hosting spaces, but it's nice to be able to sort of like coexist and help each other out. So basically, this is a new co-working space, and so they're obviously got some room for co-working, and I'll be in here from time to time as well. So I think it's probably the best co-working space now in Brisbane. But you know, the message has got to spread. You got to start somewhere. So we're just going to basically the sort of the quick forte of tonight is that we're just going to do any type of quick community announcements that anyone has to say. Literally give 5 minutes to it, and then we're going to jump into a quick legal session with Louis. And one of the reasons for that is I've actually joined a law firm now. I've Consensus basically ran out of money. A lot of people inside Consensus were jumping up and down, and they're actually scaling literally very low. I think they're going to be like 1/5 the size. So they've really had to sort of clamp down, and they're kind of getting rid of their Australian side of things. Does anyone have any announcements or anything else? Did you?
I was interested in Cardano. Meet up tomorrow night.
Cardano meet up tomorrow night. Whereabouts?
It's at the library, city library.
All right, cool. So Cardano is pretty exciting. There's some of the original guys from Cardano were on the original Ethereum team, from my understanding, and they spun off and created Cardano. And they've got a better governance model, from my understanding. I've looked into it. I have issues with the scalability side of things. But yeah, anyone else have any announcements? Oh, Stephen, go. So this is Stephen Alexander, guys, and he's going to be, he's been, I like to think of him as someone who creates alchemy. He looks at systems, and one explanation of what he does is digital value capture, and so it sort of fits in very nicely with this whole blockchain movement. But he's specifically focusing on business processes on Holochain, and has had quite a sort of deep understanding of Holochain for as long as I have now, I think.
Yeah,
so yeah.
Yeah,
come and sit up, yeah.
My geekiness is I do abstract value, tangible and intangible, but more measurable. And I can determine in great complexity, if you introduce a new capability to that interconnected world, what the value would be, either from a holistic point of view or right down to individual actors. So I can actually determine what value you do in the world that you're about to inflict yourself on with currently blockchain or holochain. And so I'm going to, any papers I do on that with holochain, I'll gladly share. I've got a methodology. I'm going to be teaching that in London this year at the Hull International Business School, and then that will be taught in campuses around the world. I'm going to teach value practitioners, but around holochain, and decentralized systems coexisting with centralized systems, so they can start understanding what the implications and the value will be of embracing and adopting your capabilities as you roll them out. Okay, and that's going to give you a lot more insight into the impact that you have all the way in, and the knock-on effect. So I'll be sharing that with the group in terms of, and in particular, I've been watching Holochain for some time. I was with Tom with Consensus, and last for a year my official title was strategy manager globally. But what I was doing was looking at the subtotal of Ethereum and then all the Consensus projects, which were difficult to manage because all decentralized, and then looking what impact they could have, both from the top down, so telecommunications, and all the various sectors and then converging sectors, what over a period of 10 years, and what would those values be, and creating a new kind of, I don't know if you're familiar with things called assets under management. So everyone's got assets, and there's about $22 trillion worth of assets under management today, buildings and everything. And the work I did shows that today everyone's spreadsheet at the end of the year reporting should have about 10% of value of digital assets on that. They've all got zero today, but there should be about 10% of digital assets under management as a category. And that over the next 10 to 15 years is going to ramp up really, really, and you're going to be creating it all. You're going to be creating the preconditions for these, and I call it alchemy, because they'll be created as a byproduct of the processing and the activities that you're generating. Okay, and I know how to sort of capture that. I can predict that with great accuracy. I know how to capture it, I know how to mechanize things like trust or truth, so-called intangible assets, and then actually how to then tokenize those, so those eventually start affecting what our money is really, or our coins are really made up of. And I'm predicting at some stage over 80% will be so-called intangible asset, and the other will be what we've always known as crypto money, which is really helpful because the byproduct of that activity is abundance. Because if you use that, if you start using that in your currency and transactions, you actually start engendering more of those as a trust, and more of those truth, and more of those other qualities, which you can then, it's a cycle. So a byproduct of an economy based on that isn't debt, it's actually abundance, right? And that's what Joe had me doing. It wasn't going to work, I could see in Ethereum, all sorts of problems, scalability and privacy, everything else we know about. But the Holochain promises all of that, and I haven't found anything scratching hard why it's not going to deliver. So I'm very excited and wish you all the well. Get going, get coding it, and I'll work from the other end of the fence.
So he's just been made a professor by Hull Business School.
Yes, I'll be the first. I'll be the first adjunct professor teaching.
He didn't have to do all the work, but
well, they read all my papers,
yeah,
and I've done so much work on them. I'm dyslexic, so the joke is I couldn't apply for the course that I've developed because I couldn't even fill the application form in. But anyway, so it'll be the first course worldwide which is applied blockchain and Holochain from a business perspective, and we're getting really interested.
So think of like a business analysis, but like fully actually holistic, but actually doing their job.
And we'll do this session. If anyone has any interest in this, we'll share.
Me too.
Okay. Just keep it. We'll share it with you. We'll send something out. But anyway, that I can support you in your and underpin the work. And I live in Malay, work in Brisbane. I'm there.
Which business school?
Hull Business School.
HULT. So HULT.
Oh,
International. They've got they actually philanthropic money from Scandinavia, and they've got campuses in Dubai, Shanghai, London, and so on. So it's really cool that we've got it in there. But it's been about 3 years' work to get foot in the door.
Anyway, thank you, everybody.
And I've seen his computer, he's just got maps as big as that, like relationship maps and value flows between different entities. You know, he's sort of looked at all sectors of society, like, you know, I've never seen a picture of everything all in one and how the value flows. So he's got a very big picture of it all, and he'll tell you if something is going to work pretty quickly.
Because my wife said, no one wanted to do my head.
And so now we're just going to have a session. We've never had a lawyer speak here before, and then now here I am being sponsored by a law firm. And so we're going to have Louis de Beer, as in only here for the beer, talk. And so Louis is maybe one of 5 financial service lawyers in Queensland. Maybe there's more. There's not a lot of them. And he has some of the some of his clients basically build a lot of houses around here, and they do a lot of development in all sorts of regions. But yeah, there's the other cool thing is, and the reason why I got very attracted to the firm is that they've got a securities license, they've got a bunch of different banking licenses, and Louis is going to talk to us about what a security is. So I'll let you rip, Louis.
Oh, thanks.
I'll let you sit there so it catches your voice better.
Yeah, good.
And then
okay.
you can just press the down button.
Okay, great. Ooh.
I'll just check that down works. Yep. That'll do.
Guys, Stephen Alexander, bona fide genius. Seriously, this guy is so clever. He's got a website, stephenalexander.com. Go check what he does. He works with government on a thing called wicked problems. It's a term, it's a thing. Look at wicked problems. It's when people look at things in the world and they think, damn, I can't solve this. Then Stephen comes in, like, I don't know, Batman flies in and he basically, he comes in to save the day. And what he does is he looks at the holistic issue, takes it up a level, lower level, that type of thing, goes 4D on it and fixes it. So I've known Stephen for quite a while, and he's, like I said, guys, really good to look at his site there. Now, from my side, Thomas has joined us as a director, smart contract. Yay. The thing is, thank you. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, you'll have to yay for yourself here. But the point is, what we did as a law firm, I'm obviously from the old country as well. You can hear from the accents. My kids are Australian. They think my accent's funny. Don't know why. And basically, financial services background there, old school financial services background. Started looking, getting back into it really because of blockchain. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got into law again. And since about 2015, I've been studying most of the litigation and stuff that's come out of the US with regard to securities and what the direction is we're going in. And so at some stage, Stephen actually introduced Tom and I. And so Tom, basically, we kind of looked at this whole thing, and it's, smart contract has got mechanisms that make certain things happen, but then we've also got the reg tech side of it. And we've been in a few discussions with ASIC, where they've not been too pleased with this whole new world, because I'm not sure, if they understand it. They've been really, really good in the discussions, even though it was quite robust. But at this stage, what we need to be aware of is that the RegTech and FinTech is really going to either be the make or break of where we go. Because in the end, the whole idea for us is we want to unchain people. We want everybody to be able to realize their own value. We want people to be able to deal with each other, own their own data, etc., etc. And so tonight, what I just wanted to get through very quickly is what is a security? I want to talk about a couple of schemes that could possibly work for doing STOs, they're now called, and ITOs, and there's a whole lot of TOs happening at the moment. And so I'm just going to run through those. And when Tom and I sort of sat down and we looked at the firm, we started the firm on the 1st of October. Tom came on board 15th of November. It was all a question of how do we get smart contract, fintech and regtech to work together? And I think that's pretty much where we're up at the moment. So we can substantively as well as legally build a good contract. So what is a security? Basically depends on who you ask. USA definition, I'm not going to get into it, but that's swatting a fly with a beeric right there. It's basically anything that can gain value. And what was interesting is when I started reading the class actions when they descended like a ton of bricks on the SAFTs and all these other ICOs, it was anything that could gain value was really the issue. Anything where you created scarcity or gained value. So it basically knocked most of the ICOs out. So people were saying, hey, let's do utility coins, it's a utility coin, but hey, there's only 30 million of them, and so what if people want to pay more for them? Immediately in the area of security. So that's the 1934 Act that explains what it is. And this will be available online, so I've just put it all in here so you guys can sort of grab it and drill down on it, and I really want feedback as well, because we're really all composing while we're singing still. I don't think anyone's really worked this out. So the EU, there you start with a MiFID II, and the full directive is bigger than Ben-Hur's underpants. There's 63 subsections in there that refer to other subsections, but this one is a good place to start. 3.3.1, Article 3.3.1.3, what is a financial instrument? And it's very, very clear. And it actually goes and sort of dissects what the Americans are saying and all of that, and it kind of puts it in categories. So if you guys want to start with this prezzo somewhere, just grab that page, have a look at it, and you'll start understanding what a security is in terms of financial, as far as financial instruments go. But then we go to Australia. It's a hell of a lot more elusive, the definition of security over here. I actually went to Wikipedia because you kind of just give up. It says that security is a thing in action, a claim enforceable by legal proceedings rather than owning some tangible property. To effect regulation, the legislation adopts various definitions of security and financial product that are used. So there's the Corporations Act alone gives you 3 definitions of a security, depending on which direction you're going. Then you've got the PPSR Act. You've got personal property security. You've got the ASIC Act. You've got, you know what I'm saying? You've basically got a matrix of sections that refer to a security. So it's a little bit of a minefield. If you're going to be launching your security token, you've got this property you want to tokenize. I mean, you might run into trouble, is all I'm saying, in Australia. But also in America, then there's the Howey test as well. Which of you guys know about the Howey test? Okay, the Howey test basically says that if you do this, it's a financial service, and it falls under the 1940 Act. And the Howey test says that anything, the Howey test is if you pool funds and you give it to a third party with the expectation of getting a return, then it's a financial service. Okay, and so in Australia, what did we do? We enshrined that in legislation. So there's an investment of money, expectation of profits, common enterprise from the efforts of a third party. You don't control it. So that is also a security. And then the Section 9 of the Corporations Act actually enshrines the Howey test. So still all background, guys. Am I going too fast? It's boring. I can see some of you guys you're still there? Everyone with me? Because what I'm trying to do is just give you all the guff up front so you can go and read it further if you're so inclined. But then it doesn't include a partnership with more than 20 members, a body corporate, the scheme operated by a bank, issues of debentures or convertible notes, or a barter scheme. Funnily enough, barter card is excluded.
And that's in the barter card exclusion is actually in the Corporation Act. Yeah.
In one place, but not in another place. It's in a definition. They said barter card basically is excluded. So somebody must have lobbied government back in the 50s. I think it's 1958.
Yeah, one line in there.
Yeah, they got the one line in there, but for how long? Anyway, so what I'm saying is that fintech and regtech is the key, because fintech is how you build the stuff. Regtech is making sure that ASIC doesn't, jump on your scheme and drag you backwards through a bush, and they will, because they can. And if they want to do a Section 19 hearing, I don't know if anyone's been through a Section 19 hearing. It's quite an experience, because they've got their lawyers over there and they just drill down on every single issue. I mean, one of the issues in an ICO, in a managed investment scheme we did, was to say that it's low risk to mine cryptocurrency. And they said, you haven't described the risks. And we said, well, it's low risk. And they said, well, the price of electricity could increase. So you have to really, really know what you're doing with them. So you can issue securities in Australia, provided that you're licensed to do so. And if not, ASIC will shut you down so quickly it'll make your head spin. The good news is that ASIC does allow you to use other people's licenses in Australia. Who's heard of the responsible entities for hire? So you actually run off to ASIC, you get yourself an AFSL, and you say to everybody else, hey, I'll take the responsibility for it. So these are people who really like risk. It's like, you know, skydiving with a parachute sometimes. I mean, and these responsible entities kind of take all the risk. And they, not many, there's a few. And we do work for a few of them. We're the scheme lawyers for a few of these guys. And like I said, you know, they're risk takers. But you can also get your own license as well. But this responsible entity can actually look after your STO or your ICO or your ITO or whatever TO you're doing. So there's two types that I want to refer to tonight. There's many, but the two of them, the first one is a managed investment scheme. And a managed investment scheme is the Howey test. All of us get together, we pool our funds, we give it to a third party, he invests it out of our control, and we hope to get a return. And so a wholesale scheme is where you issue an information memorandum and you tell people about the scheme, they put their money in and they hope to get money back. And a retail scheme is where you actually go to mums and dads. And that's where ASIC gets a lot more tense. And that's where the SEC can actually jump on you all the way from America in Australia. And I'll explain how they can do that. So we're pooling funds, and it's useful for a SAFT type of arrangement. One of the projects that Tom and I are doing at the moment is an Australian SAFT where we're going to pool the funds and then do the ITO, STO later, ITO really. And then what we do is they take units at this stage, and when the STO gets done, they either get discounted coins, tokens, or they actually get reimbursed or get repaid with interest. So that's how you would sort of do this, and you can actually issue this under an AFSL, an Australian Financial Services License. The license we have says that you can issue securities. But like I said, securities can mean a lot of things, but in this case, you can issue securities. So you can.
What is useful for SAFT?
A simple agreement for a token, for tokens. It's like a safe, like where you're doing if you're listing a company, then people do a simple agreement for equity, so they pay people in equity. So this is pretty much a simple agreement for tokens. It's a SAFT. It's a bit of a term thing. I probably should have explained it better. But have a look at that. Google that. So, for instance, and SAFT that we did was a gaming company, online gaming company, and it's a bit complicated. But on the left-hand side, these investors, what they do is they pool their funds in the SAFT fund, and the SAFT fund loans the money to an SPV, the SPV to a company, a special purpose vehicle. The special purpose vehicle then goes and develops all the software. It then manages and it builds this casino, this online casino, and then what it does is it does a second fund and does a token issue, and then obviously the tokens there are used in the casino themselves, and they're also used to repay the investors. So that's a way that a managed investment scheme can do a nice fundraise. We sat with these guys first, and they all thought, look, the first fundraising we're going to do is not going to be under an AFSL. What we're going to do is go offshore with it and ask and say to people, buy our tokens now in Bitcoin and Ethereum. You know, so we now have the option for them to actually do a fiat fundraise in Australia, and then to go and raise enough funds to give them liquidity, and also then to go off and do the ITO. Would be the term? Yeah, just stop me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So that's one way you can use an MIS. The second one are debenture mortgage schemes. And what people do is they pool their money and the SPV lends the money to somebody, somebody maybe a building or somebody who's got property, takes a mortgage over the asset, and then the holders of the debentures then get a fractionalized piece of that mortgage, basically. It's a fractionalized mortgage. So if you look at it in our context, what you have is you've got a couple of people there, they invest in the debenture mortgage scheme, it loans money to purchase an asset, takes a mortgage over the asset, and they all get part of that mortgage. So they're all fractional holders of the mortgage, which is quite good, because what Tom is working on at the moment is that we can actually do debenture mortgage tokens. So he writes a smart contract whereby the terms and conditions of the debenture is written into the token, and then people can now go and take that token and put it on an exchange and see if anybody would like to buy it. We'll use an example. It's an actual example, I think we can. Let's say that someone's got a whole lot of art sitting in a room somewhere. That art is worth 500 million. So what he does then is he says, I want to tokenize this art. We give it to a trustee. He takes mortgage over it. The mortgage gets fractionalized, and people then buy into the art, into this pool of art. Every year the art gets valued, and the value of the tokens are supposed to go up all the time. So, and also, you know, it's all about the security of the art, all that type of stuff. So it takes assets and makes them liquid. And
but why would I take a mortgage in over the property? I understand that they basically raise the debenture mortgage, and that they do that and they tokenize it, but why is that just for security?
it has to be a mortgage that gets fractioned. It has to be secured. That's the whole idea with the debenture mortgage scheme.
How is this different to a REIT?
A REIT is actually a real estate trust that's gone and been listed.
Yes.
So-
So, a non-listed REIT, is this any different, or is this?
No, it's about the same.
Same.
It works. You could use it
It's just
for
an unlisted REIT, basically.
correct,
Okay.
and you could use it for a REIT as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one thing. So real estate investment trust, where you get people together and they all fractionalise the mortgage. They actually use the debenture mortgage scheme for that. So the next thing is, but you'll see I refer to exchanges the whole time, and I'm trying to, sorry, keep going.
Sorry, just one other question.
Yeah.
Can a non-profit organisation issue a debenture?
Yeah,
Yeah.
all you need is a mortgage.
Okay.
So you have a mortgage, you fractionalise the mortgage, not-for-profits can do it.
Can it issue a debenture without a mortgage? A non-profit organisation?
No, there has to be, it is a fractionalised mortgage. That's the scheme.
This law firm is 25% owned by not-for-profit.
We're actually at 25% owned by not-for-profit.
Right.
So-
There's another question I'll ask later.
No, it's all good. You're very
You need
welcome.
the underlying asset effectively for security.
Correct.
Okay.
It needs to have an underlying asset, it needs to be fractionalised. And if you look at it that way, it's tokenising. You know, a debenture is actually a token.
Yeah, I know.
How is it different to a bond?
Uh,
Because a bond doesn't have to have an asset mortgage at all. It can just be issued by.
yeah,
So
that-
can a bond be issued by a non-profit?
a bond issued by a non-profit. Can I come back to you on that
Yeah, I know
one?
it's complicated. Yeah.
Because there's a whole lot of stuff around bonds. I'll talk to you about it after.
Yeah, okay.
So what happens now is that if we look at exchanges, because the whole time I'm talking about coins and exchange or tokens and exchanges, the issue that we have with exchanges, in June last year, I went over to Japan to see a guy called Saito So. And the reason why is because he was the lawyer for the FSA in Australia, in Japan, agreed that these guys could actually self-regulate the exchanges. So they had 5 cryptocurrency exchanges at that stage that were self-regulated. So he was the guy who wrote all the regulation around it. What we're looking at in Australia, in Australia, we're kind of saying that you can actually do an exchange at the moment without financial services licensing, but if you look at Info 225, the direction that ASIC is moving into, they are saying that, you know, if it's a money market, it's starting to move into the areas of a money market. So we think that licensing would be good. Tom has built recently an exchange on the Gold Coast.
Yeah, so I deployed the tokens for Metamorph Exchange. So Metamorph is built on the 0x protocol, which is on Ethereum.
So
It's a bit slow and clunky, but it works.
So we're building another exchange now under an ESV CLP that's investing in it, and we're actually going to take this exchange's infrastructure and white label it. So if people want to come and get their own exchange, fine, make it work.
So exchanges will be as common as websites, I think.
But at the same time, what we're wanting to do is set up a license, an RE license, and then put all these exchanges, also offer the licensing with the exchange, and then make sure that things are regulated.
Sorry, why do you say exchanges will be as common as websites?
Just because nobody wants to be stopped by an exchange saying, no, you can't exchange with an exchange. So a lot of developers are thinking, well, let's just make it really common.
There's another reason for
them.
So I think they'll consolidate at some point.
Oh, I don't think so.
Wait. Hold on, don't be that clear. Can we disagree quickly? For debate. First thing on the exchanges, when in Japan, I said to Saito, where are these guys making their money type thing? And, can I just list my coin? And his view was that in Japan, they won't list your token for under $1 million US, because they know you're cashed up. You've just gone and done an ITO or an STO or whatever they know, so they shake you down. And they basically say, look, put $1 million down, and then we'll put it on there for 6 months and see if somebody wants to buy it, type of thing. And so you don't really have a lot of security with that type of thing. For that reason, people are turning around saying, but why must I do this? But now, as far as exchanges being common, what will happen is that the market will sort itself out, because there's a lot of arbitrage that's happening at the moment. Whereas in financial markets at the moment, do you guys know what arbitrage is? It's where for the ones who don't know, it's where you're trading on this exchange, in foreign exchange, for instance, and you see that the dollar's selling slightly cheaper in China, so you quickly buy some there and you make 0.5 of a cent, and you
And you end up spending your whole life looking at tables.
That's right, and you're basically night and day sitting there watching these spikes go. We can read derivatives traders. We can actually read your personality type of how you trade, I think. And so there's a big statement. But the point with the exchanges is that they'll start arbitraging. They'll start working with each other, and at some stage they'll start getting bigger. There probably will be some kind of centralization. But what is an exchange there for? It is for. The exchange is basically there to let your coin escape or your token escape its ecosystem and go to a fiat type of currency eventually, because that's still the world that we live in. So even the nature of exchanges, I believe, will change. And tokens will become accepted, and they'll be at various different levels. And you might have a token just for my street, where all of us put our money in the jar for that street to fix a pothole. You might have one for the city. You might, I'm just saying.
I think one of the major problems of the exchanges is lack of liquidity, and if you have plenty of exchanges, then they won't be really used because there are no buyers and there are no sellers, and vice versa. It's like a social media website. Nobody wants to be on a social media website because he's the only one on the website. That's why there's a winner takes it all thing.
Yeah.
That's why we have Facebook, and that's why we have just a handful of stock exchanges.
Absolutely, and that's
It's
what
not a
we're
technology
that's what
problem.
we're going to come down to. So what we're doing at the moment, we're saying to everybody, have a go, let's see if what comes out of this market, because at the moment we don't know.
There are liquidity providers that you can be back into exchanges that you still have exchanges to use. So there's these big people with capital, and they just have APIs back in to provide the liquidity to small exchanges.
Yeah, that's what we did at the 0x protocol. So every other exchange on 0x protocol actually shares everyone else's orders.
Yes.
So it provides a lot of turnover. Yeah, a lot of liquidity.
How do you deal with KYC?
No KYC with 0x protocol, but there is the first mention of
Well, that's now what the ASIC's going to come down when you say, well, hang on, you need to, when you can say, I want a bit of ASIC, says you need it.
It's KYC, it's Austrac, it's all that stuff,
Yeah.
So anyway, just on the Exchanges Corporations Act also talks about exchanges. I've just put it in there for when you guys wake up in the middle of the night, you can't sleep, and you feel you want to read that and just fall right back to sleep. And so the last issue that I've got for you is, I'm not a very good presenter of legal stuff. Okay, because I'm trying for people to take me seriously, you know. It's like a serious legal exposition here.
We're in Australia.
Okay,
This is
fair
a
enough.
South African building. So
There we go. Yeah, it works for me. So the point is talking about internationality, regulatory passporting comes into it as well. Because you might think to yourself, wacko, I've just been under an AFSL, I've got this MIS up and running, I'm selling 60 million worth of whatever, and everybody's going to want to buy it. Now, you have to be a bit careful because there are other jurisdictions that might get their wee in a froth if you start flogging it uphill and down dale. So what you have is, let's take the US for example. There's Reg S and Reg D. Who's heard of that? Okay, so Reg S says to you, if you sell a security, you must say that the security, this is the disclaimer, it's not for sale to Americans. That's the first level. Second level is, but if an American does buy it, he can't sell it for 12 months. So it becomes illiquid in his hands. And the third level, which should scare the living daylights out of all of us, is that if too many Americans buy it, then the Americans decide this is actually an American scheme. And they whack Reg A+ onto you like clubbing a little baby seal. Right there. So you've got to be really careful that you get your international passporting. So KYC comes into me when you say KYC. I'm not looking at it as reporting to the man. What I'm saying is just, keep it to 30% in the US, and please, for goodness sake, don't go in Facebook and sell in the US, whatever you do. Don't go and hire a football player over there, or set up your regional office in New York City. Don't do it, please don't. I know it sounds really flash to all your mates back in Brisbane, but you may find that the US SEC starts, casting a hairy eyeball over your STO or ITO or whatever TO. So the EU disclaimers, guess what, also contained in lots of the directives. They're pretty good. So I'm not going to go through all of those as well. So there's disclaimers there, but at least they won't come and say you're an American scheme. So just where to next? I'm saying that security token offerings are possible out of Australia. I think we've got enough credibility. We're probably one of the most heavily regulated in the world. We're quite well regarded overseas. With fintechs needed to build the scheme. So, we need to talk about schemes like the bond issue, an interesting one. RegTech is needed to ensure that it falls under old school regulation, that we can pull the old regulation over to the new so that you don't get taken out. And then lastly, with our law firm, if you look on the back of the business card, we've actually said the future is bright. So it's next legal because the future is bright. Because from our side, I think it's looking pretty good. Because our whole view and mission is to unchain people. And I think this is going to happen. I think the centralization in the financial markets again, if we can just manage not to get shut down by old school regulation, if we can try to bring government with, I'll just take one more thing, just on my side as well, is that we should convince people like ASIC, I hope this doesn't go on the website, but we should convince ASIC to become an oracle, if you understand what I mean by that. Because here's your smart contract floating around, and let's say they now build their legislation like an oracle, then it can stop you before your STO goes forward. It's almost like a fence at the top of the hill rather than the ambulance at the bottom of the mountain. And I think if
the police sell on the jail right at the bottom.
Yeah, well, they basically send you a cake with a file in it. But the fact is that my thinking is that, and I'm submitting it to you guys for discussion, is that we really need to get the regulators to understand, and they need to understand that they're going to be interacting with our smart contracts. And if they interact early on and properly, and we could sort of, and that's why I'm really keen to see if we can get some self-regulation going for the exchanges in Oz. And we'll do that by getting one AFSL across, building a few exchanges, giving it to people and saying, hey, go out there and try this thing in a regulated fashion, and let's see what comes of this market. You know, get people out there. So pretty much, the future is bright, I think.
Who do you see as your first adopters of that? Will it be property developers?
Yes.
Who's going to the space?
Well, we've got 3 really big projects going, but the property developers are going to be quite a good one. If you look at the old BrickX scheme, you know, the old Fiat BrickX scheme, I reckon that thing could be well redone, but it's a debenture mortgage scheme maybe. So yeah, so property developers definitely. I think ASIC's going to be really looking at it very closely because of the mums and dads that they want to protect.
Yeah.
So.
I had a brief look at the BrickX thing, and I understood that they set up the whole thing already a couple of years ago, and there was even a lower barrier of entry because no crypto was needed, and still it didn't take off.
19 million.
Explanation for that? Have you spoken to the people, did some research on?
And that's that. I'm a little bit amazed by that as well, because I thought, you know, legally, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. You know, they went to ASIC and they got a special exemptions to build side-by-side schemes to actually get people to own a specific property, etc. But the thing is, in a certain sense, it's fractional. It's owning one property. We're talking more about the pooling of funds. And you're not really focused on the asset, you're focused more on the value of a token, which is like real money. So in the old school way, it was a harder sell. I think it'd be an easier sell if I know it's backed by an asset, and let's say that Tom now comes and pays me in a BrickX coin, and then I go, what the heck is this? And I go and have a look at it, and I drill down and say, oh, hang on, my asset value in the pooled assets that are there is actually, you know, $5, and you know what I'm saying, it's actually got an intrinsic value. So I don't understand why BrickX didn't do well.
I found the concept pretty interesting for both sides. So on one side, house owners who have a house and the house value rose dramatically, but they don't have any cash. And they don't want to take a reverse mortgage, so they sell 30% of their property, house 1 to 3 coin. And other people, they don't have enough money to invest in a whole house, but they want to get into the whole building thing, so they can just invest tiny little bit in some shares of a house. And I envisioned a website where you just have plenty of houses to pick from. You choose to buy 1% of this house, and I thought that's a fantastic setup, and I was totally surprised when I came across BrickX that they actually did the thing, and I think they sold 15 houses in the last 4 years or so.
And the lawyer who did that did a beautiful job. I mean, it's a fantastic scheme, but just didn't pick up.
You did buy a share.
There you go.
One click.
You see, because the REIT is so much more liquid.
Specialist REIT in residential. If you want to
And if you buy into, sorry, I apologize, I'm talking over you. I'm trying to, but you, I think that there's a key in that, because the BrickX scheme was quite illiquid, whereas with a REIT you just
get them out,
buy sell. So it's a liquidity, and I'm thinking that if you do BrickX with liquidity, that's what I'm trying to postulate. Maybe it's the right scheme. That time didn't, you know, it was in the wrong context or milieu. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
You know, the IPO must get the head around how to actually start taxing the token, because that should token value grow.
I've got the GTSR for that. I didn't actually put it in, but I've got a whole lot of stuff on what the ATO is saying about they see it as money. But the problem there is, I mean, you know, is it capital gains? Is it all that stuff we need to, So there's a lot of research.
The money on realisation, won't it?
Well,
they're not going to tax you on realisation.
See, that's the point. That's the point right there. Is it capital gains? What is it?
Well, it could be interpreted value, the value is different to money, which is different to price. So these are all elements you've got to understand. Yeah.
Correct. So is it that I've now gone and bought a whole lot of, excuse my language, shitcoin, and you know, and then the next moment it's worth this? Can I now go and get it? Can I write that off? How would the ATO feel about that? Because all I'm doing is I'm applying the.
They want their cake, and you want yours too.
Well, good question, and for
Well, I
you
lost
know,
my Bitcoin, and
yeah.
claiming there's a tax loss.
Sorry, what?
Oh, say for instance you lost your private keys to Bitcoin or something.
Oh, yeah,
You
well,
would claim that as a tax loss.
Yeah.
Never thought of that. That's a good one.
That's the gold in the boat. That's the gold in the boat. That's all right. What it's saying.
Nice. I don't want to keep you guys because I'm not. Yeah, I probably took too long. But thank you very much for your time.
But taking into account that it was a legal topic, it was quite entertaining.
If not informative, at least it was entertaining.
Just going to talk about Holochain. And so I did the Holochain developers course last year. I've actually, I met up with Arthur, one of the co-founders of Holochain, and they've been doing this a lot longer than, you know, blockchain and Bitcoin, this type of mentality. And I was, since February last year when I met up with him in London, I just sort of kind of knew that I was more on his wavelength for a long time. So I've been following the project, since February last year, and pretty seriously. And anyway, I got 10 out of 10, or 11 out of 11. So I was very happy with myself. And not many tests of, you know, Ron and I went to school together. I wasn't very smart at school, so we were in B Maths B. So, but I see it as really powerful, and it's completely infected my brain for over a year. But I actually haven't been able to talk about it because of my position at Consensus. So that's over. But basically, I'm just going to go. These are actually some of the Holochain slides. I spoke to them and said, you know, what's the best way to talk to you about it? And having done the developers course, there was one video that everybody shared around in the course that sort of spoke about the philosophy of Holochain first. And I actually put that link in the meetup invite. Did anyone watch that video? It was a 29-minute video. Yeah. So that was that's kind of where we're coming from. Now the big thing that gets me is that you know, Bitcoin and Ethereum have been amazing, and the goal back then was, you know, how can we transact without a third party, a human party? And all we did is we replaced machines. So we replaced a blockchain to be able to transact. But in the natural world, if you know, say for instance, Kendrick and I want to do a transaction, we actually don't have to get permission from a blockchain and fall inside the blockchain protocol. We can actually create our own protocol. And this is the big difference that I see Holochain, one of the big differences. So Holochain and Kendrick and I, we basically have what they call a DNA file. And if we both sort of subscribe to the same rules, or we have the same ethics about things, or the same, you know, in Bitcoin they called it a Ricardian contract. If you wanted to do just a standard sale of an item, there was a process. And so we could take that whole process and now put it in the equivalent of a smart contract in a DNA file of a Holochain dApp, and they call them HAPs, like happy apps. And if we both agree to those rules, then we can just transact together and we're held accountable to those rules. And if, say for instance, I break those rules, then he sends out a ping to the greater Holochain network. And that ping is kind of, think of the equivalent of like a immune system response, and basically people will stop transacting with me because, you know, I've been pinged once as someone who's not following through with my smart contract logic, or our shared agreement. So I see it as like, it's actually more peer-to-peer and more decentralized than Bitcoin and Ethereum. You know, Bitcoin was said to me be really decentralized, but that incentive to just like have, you know, it's basically whoever can get the highest processing mining gear. And so it kind of centralizes again. And I've heard comments out there that, you know, Bitcoin and Ethereum are more, I know Ethereum's definitely more centralized than Bitcoin, And I've heard comments that Bitcoin and Ethereum are more centralized than the current banking system. So I can't validate that or work that out, but I've heard that from experts who have said that before. So yeah, it kind of didn't. It's kind of like, have we gone off on the wrong track or not? I don't know, but this seems interesting to me. The other big dream of Ethereum was that the goal was that you would be able to actually run a node, an Ethereum node, in your phone, and it hasn't turned out like that. Basically these nodes, you have to have a lot of processing power to even download a couple of terabytes of data where Ethereum's at now, and you'll never be able to run this in your phone. So it was too sort of like, it's already become too heavy, and so the other thing is, what I started to really realize a couple of years ago was that, sure, we can go for really high security and we can get every single node on a network to verify every transaction. And if you can think about that, like, say for instance, I hand some money to Louis, or there's an event that happens, everybody's individual brains is remembering that. But for that transaction to be true, we don't actually have to get every single brain in the world to verify that was a true transaction. Kind of the magic number is we have to get maybe 100 to verify that was a real event. And if there's 100 nodes that validate that that's true, then that's probably enough validation for me to act on that transaction and hand the house over or hand the keys over, or to know that money really has been shifted. And then the other thing that got me was like, wow, this is no web servers, no mining, no cryptocurrency needed. And the other big part of Holochain is it's actually just a protocol. So it's like HTTPS, and there's no one that makes any money off HTTPS. Well, actually there are secondary businesses, but yeah, it's just a protocol, and you don't really make any money off protocols. So the big thing that I was amazed by is that Holochain is based off the technology called distributed hash tables. Does anyone ever heard of distributed hash tables? Anyone use a distributed hash table? Anyone downloaded an illegal movie off the internet? Anyone use BitTorrent? So that BitTorrent is distributed hash tables. So it's already proven itself for 20 years to be incredibly scalable. And what really then got me was that I know that World of Warcraft, they release some of their updates, the really big ones, through the BitTorrent network. And they do that because there's no central servers that can handle, millions of 15-year-old kids downloading 20 gigabytes or 10, 15 gigabytes all at once to get the latest update to World of Warcraft. There's only sort of one infrastructure that can handle that, and that's BitTorrent. So that's distributed hash tables. And that's where one kid starts downloading, and as he's downloading, he's uploading to somebody else, and it constantly goes on. So everyone's paying it forward. And that network actually works really well, even without money. You don't even need to do any incentives. But there is incentive there that people get their movies for free. So that's one reason. So yeah, the way Holochain like to explain it is it's actually just a pattern. If you're gonna, say for instance, if my phone is verifying, so in the developers course you would specify, well, how secure do you want this information saved? Do I want to have 100 other devices saving this information or saving a shard of this information? Or do I want to have 20,000 devices? And you get to choose, how redundant you want to make that information, how secure you want to make that. And so that's kind of the pattern that they're talking about here. So if you want to just have something that's incredibly scalable, incredibly fast, you might only choose to have it verified by 50 devices straight away. And this is another whole thing. So you don't have one big database that saves everything like on Bitcoin or Ethereum or all the blockchains or EOS or a whole lot of them. You actually, say for instance, Kendrick and I go and do some transactions together. We actually create our own distributed hash table. It's only actually just between me and Kendrick. And that's how we sort of solve the privacy issues. And we might only require in our app or our transactions to only have two parties save a copy of information, or I might have a hard drive at home that also it becomes a secondary backup of all my private data. So that you can orchestrate it in any way where you could just only have your private data, like all your profile information, you could have it so that it never actually leaves your device and it only ever gets sent to your, what they call the Holochain ports, where you can have a backup at your house as well. And in terms of like hacking and security and all that, like, even if you speak to the best security experts. I remember I was at a hackathon in New York, and I was talking to the Linux Foundation, and they still, this was the few of their most prized developers and security experts, and they were like, there's still nothing that's more unhackable than just saving information on a hard drive sitting at your house, and that's the best way. And that's why Uport came out with the 3D box. So their Ethereum solution is to just only save your private data, on a little hard drive at your house. So each app has its own social space whereby members play by the shared rules. So say for instance there's a Twitter app or any type of app, and if we want to interact on that app, if say for instance you want to make some of your tweets actually viewable by everybody, then you specify that when you're saving the information, and the field is called usage type, and you choose if you want to make it public or private. So if you make it public, what it means is it will save a copy of your Twitter information or your profile information on the shared distributed hash table for that app. And then in that app, you might have let's just have 20 other apps always managing and keeping a copy of that data as well. So that's, and say for instance, one of those redundant nodes is actually not playing by the rules according to the tests in the DNA file, then again, that node will mark that other node as a non-responsive or non-compliant, and it gets knocked out of the network, and then someone else replaces. And they get paid in Holo, which is the token on top of this Holochain protocol. So blockchain has one size and fits all approach to security, but one size doesn't fit all. So this is another thing that really got me. Holochain is not about the database, it's about the agent. So it's all agent-centric. And what I think that's going to create a whole new way of interacting with everybody. Like, say for instance, I might choose in my new Holochain app or my agent-centric app that I only want to see people in my news feed that have done certain checks in my life or certain checks in their life. Maybe they have done over maybe $50,000 worth of business in certain, there might be certain things that I want, or maybe that they need to prove to me that that they actually do recycle, or whatever it might be. And so it's going to create a whole new way of meeting people, which is kind of not possible on the current infrastructure, just because you're so limited to saving such a small amount of information on a very old, clunky blockchain machine. Yeah, so I mean, the rules are going to be all different. So everyone's going to come up. It's going to create this sort of Cambrian explosion of what does fit for people. So it's Matthew Shute, one of the sort of like, I think he's the director of communications for Holochain. He likes to say, his terms are freedom to constrain. So basically, we don't want to have no freedom. We just want to be able to constrain what we. What's a good way of explaining it? We need governance rules, but we don't know what those governance rules are yet. But let's start small and let's constrain little bits until we make a bigger ecosystem. Instead of, at the moment, we are actually all constrained by the consensus rules on Bitcoin or on Ethereum, and that's just the way it's going to be. And that was just the opinion of the database experts at the time. That was it. So we're all constrained by those rules right now. And I mean, another thing that got me about Holochain is if you want to take the Ethereum consensus mechanism, you can put it on Holochain. And you can create a whole Ethereum consensus mechanism or a Bitcoin consensus mechanism on top of this architecture. And you would specify, I think of it as could kind of be like EOS really, because EOS actually only has 12 computers that validate every transaction. So that's how they scale. So, you could just do an EOS with that type of consensus mechanism. And only choose in your Holochain networking settings for that application or for that style of saving or that type of data. We only want to save it 12 times across. So you get more customization in your redundancy. So different rules. Money transactions you might want to validate thousands of times, or especially at transactions over $20,000, something like that. the opportunities as well as the forms and consequences of future will be different in each context. Authorizing or sending a nuclear missile is how we can structure our relationships. Yeah, so I've explained all this. Basically, we can structure it. Striking a custom balance of speed, cost and scalability, ease of use, how much effort is required. So here's an example. This is an example of how much data, if you were going to use a Twitter application on Holochain, how much data would you actually be using up on your phone? How much capacity do you have? So if you think about it, every Indian, there's 1.3 billion people. Say for instance, they do 1.1 tweets per day. And we specify in the Holochain networking settings that we want a redundancy factor of 100. So every tweet someone does, we need to save a copy of it 100 times. And that's enough security so that there could be no censorship. So you take that ends up being 110. So the average user has about 110 tweets per day stored on their phone. So you would basically be, if you want to earn Holo in the Holochain network, you could specify that saying, look, yep, I'm happy to be a redundancy node as well and get paid a little bit. I've got a little bit of extra phone processing power. And so if you become a user, if you want to go down this conversation method as well, you could be hosting other people's tweets as well. So one tweet is about 560 bits. So 560 bytes per tweet times 110 times by the amount of days. So basically that's 24 megabytes that you're saving of tweets per year. And that would be providing redundancy for others. And this is actually the same pattern that happens in BitTorrents now. A lot of people don't realize, but you might have a seed rate of every megabit you download, you actually upload 1.1 or 1.5 or something. It's kind of the default software settings, and that's how the network continues. So then my next question was, in my mind, I was like, well, how much space do you have in your browser to actually save? How much data can you actually save from your browser to your hard drive? And no one's been able to answer that question. But apparently it's hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes. There's no limit to it. So because I thought, well, hang on, maybe you need to, there must be some limit. There must be some type of file limit that's coming through your browser. And if someone starts loading up the network and then it's taken up a lot of your phone space, there must be some sort of limit. But yeah, apparently from the browser you can save an unlimited, as big as your hard drive, basically. But I would have thought there would be a limit. Do you guys know? Does anyone know? Is there a browser file download limit? That's the question. Don't think so, yeah.
It normally just depends on the server you're downloading from timing out, but like peer-to-peer, then I don't think it would be.
Yeah. So basically 24 megabytes to be a validator on a Twitter network running on Holochain, you'd be basically saving 24 megabytes per year to also contribute to the network as well. So there's, if we live 100 years, so, you're not going to use up all your phone space. So 1 year's worth of use is about the same. So you're basically taking 124 megabyte photos for a year, for your whole life. So there's plenty of computation and processing power there. So your phone is responsible for the same data as 13 million photos. So this is like the rules for, do you actually save data? So before you go and save data, it checks if it complies with the app DNA rules. So that's, and I see that being incredibly customized in the future. And yeah, that's how that works. The other thing that really got me, okay, so this is bridging. So the other thing that got me about Holochain was that in the blockchain space and Ethereum space, we've all been sort of competing with each other on, the sort of competing skill has been who's the best front-end developers, because you don't actually need to be a very good developer to be a smart contract developer. The real skills were in the front end. And the reason for that is because there was a lot of, the blockchain is actually pretty sort of like inconsistent. So you never know, you've probably sent a transaction before on the live network and you're not sure if something's going to be returned. or sometimes you can be waiting an hour or a couple of hours for your money to show up. So the big issue was that no one really knew how to deal with this inconsistency as a front-end developer. And that's why React got really big, and two functions in ES6, async and await in JavaScript for front-end developers. And the reason for that is because it could send a transaction and it could wait quite a long amount of time for the transaction to come back. So it's called async and await. But there's only so many of those transactions that you can have sitting in a node environment. And so what I struggled to sort of come to terms with was, why aren't we all sharing our front-end code? And yeah, we're coming from sort of another scarcity mindset, and we're not really truly collaborating, which is what the Ethereum spirit is really actually about. So Holochain have created this idea of bridging. So say for instance I go and create an app that does KYC. You can drag that module into your app if you need KYC, including the front-end code, and you can just bridge to my app. And so any deals that we have, like say for instance you go and use two KYC functions to check if someone's valid or someone's got no criminal record or whatever it might be for that, we can have some micro commissions between us. So I see there's an incredibly sort of like cumulative effect with Holochain, which you just haven't seen with Ethereum or Bitcoin. So I really see, I'm really excited by that, because they're mainly focusing just on mobile phone view, so we're not overcomplicating it with a desktop view or anything. Everyone will just walk around with a little website, and there'll be new little modules that you can drag into that. So we'll all share the same Holochain wallet, I see. It's not even out yet, by the way, so it's like, this is all proof of concept stuff. But I see it all going live in March, probably on my birthday, on the 14th of March. So, but yeah, so there's two functions in Holochain. One is where you can create like a hierarchy of how your app works. So say for instance I create a KYC, you would use one function with my app called request feature, where you would share your app DNA hash file, or like your app ID, which is just a hash of your DNA code, and you would register it with my app, and then you would have another function where you'd start pulling information from my app according to permissions that we'd already sort of predefined. And that's how that works. So we don't have to create, the amount of doubling up of work that's happened in Ethereum and Bitcoin and the whole space that I see is just ridiculous. Like, why can't we just create one really amazing interface that everyone's happy with, and then we all just add in our own extra interface as we want, or another page as we want. And so that's all going to happen in Holochain. In fact, there's actually a meeting from the 22nd to the 24th of March, where Holochain developers from around the world, and mainly Australia, we're actually all going to meet up. I'm pushing for it to happen in Byron Bay. Some other people are pushing for it to happen in Brisbane and Sydney. But basically, we're all going to come together, and we're going to decide, well, if you're already building the KYC component and you're already building the tokenized AUD component, I can just drag those two sections into my app, and not have to worry about having to compete with each other, basically, and we just move on and evolve a lot quicker. So that's going to happen. I'm pretty excited about that. So that's called bridging. So when you're designing a Holochain app, it's more about just looking at what's already out there already and what can you already bridge to, and then you just put your custom business logic on top. And that's just literally going to. I've already started pricing up Holochain apps, and I've done a lot of pricing up of like Bitcoin and Ethereum apps, and the Holochain app, the pricing wise, in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done, programming wise, always comes out to about a third the cost of having to develop an Ethereum or Bitcoin app. So much cheaper, and mainly because of that bridging effect. That's the other thing. So if you're logged into a Holochain app somewhere with someone else, then you can, according to some DNA rules, you can be automatically logged in somewhere else. So you could go to a different website, and if maybe it's a banking app, but you also need to do ride sharing. It can be immediately take that money from your banking. From the banking module of the app. It's kind of one big app, but it kind of all works in this peer-to-peer way. Yeah, so this is the other thing. At the moment, the internet puts the applications at the center, and the way Matthew explains that is that you probably find that you're kind of like always busy, and your time has always been taken up by notifications, and you're always checking your phone for some reason, and that's because it's scientifically been done that way to basically suck your attention, because they're motivated to make money off you all the time. And so the experience with this technology in the future could be totally different. And I think what I'm really excited is that it's for the first time humans really get to decide how they're going to interact with other humans, and they're going to have a bunch of filters on in their little ecosystem as specified in their DNA file on who they want to, who will come into their newsfeed or who will come into their notifications, and already pre-qualified according to your ethics. And it's going to come down to ethics, I think, in the end. And I find this hilarious because there's been a response from banks and regulators on how the technology, how it's going to be regulated, how it's going to play out. But I think when banks find out about Holochain and what's going to happen here, I think they're just going to be totally weirded out, and I don't know what they're going to do next. It's going to be really funny. And that's because humans actually all are individual and unique, and so they're all going to have individual rules. And so to try and regulate, it's going to be self-regulation, which I think will be what will win. Which is actually what we all do anyway. We all self-regulate. Yeah, so this is another thing. So now that humans are at the center again, and what that means is that, say for instance, we become the translators of between different ecosystems. So everybody close their eyes right now. And I don't know how to do this exercise. How did Matt do it? How did Matt do it?
Some people with their eyes open.
Is it? How did he do it?
3 people have to have their eyes open.
Yeah, okay, so everyone close your eyes except 3 people. So Kendra, you keep your eyes open, because you know what to do. Everyone close their eyes except Ken. Ken, you open your eyes. Okay, and so how many fingers am I holding up?
3.
Yeah, okay, so Kendrick was able to translate that to you guys through a different medium, and not through the same medium. That's the way I understand it. So it's kind of this human-centric approach. So humans get to be the validators in the network instead of, at the moment, Ethereum and Bitcoin, it runs off game theory, where it's a predefined way it's all going to be, and it's designed to the limits of what a human's capable of doing. And it's basically, the way I see it, it's a physical prison. That if we design everything off game theory, which all those theories came out of the US Army, then we are creating ourselves a physical prison. But if we design it as all this technology as human-centric, then we always end up being at the sort of the wheel of the ship. So we always get to steer how it's going to be. That's the way I explain it. Yeah, this is it. Blockchain, freedom from constraint by others, and Holochain is freedom to constrain. Yeah, and this is the way like a card game works. So if we're playing a game with cards right now, we all just agree to the rules. So that's what those rules will be in the DNA file of a Holochain app. And as soon as someone breaks those rules, or one peer notices that those rules are broken, then it's the immune response that they tell everybody else this person cheated, and then there's a re-analysis of everything, and they work out what to do from that point. So that's how we handle bad nodes and bad actors. Yeah, so they're talking now about, and so they've taken some of their frameworks from the way the human body and nature works. So that's why they call the DNA file the DNA app. So if we have 2 cells in my body, those 2 cells only talk to each other because they share the same DNA. They're not actually going and getting permission from my brain to be able to talk to each other. They communicate in a peer-to-peer fashion already. So that's the analogy they normally use. And if one of those cells doesn't have the same DNA code in its cell, then it actually fires off an alert and says, look, there's a foreign body in my arm. And then the immune system comes, which is another set of apps if in Holochain, like the Holochain police or the immune system. But, it's going to be another whole, just the way humans actually police each other right now, it's going to happen in the digital world. So they refer to this as mutual sovereignty. So Arthur says, to empower communities of all shapes and flavours and sizes to organise themselves and their flows of resources more effectively. So the next thing is, so they've created this is what the token's about, a hosting company that you're able to pay in Holo. Because computation is a lot cheaper, you're basically tapping into storage of the power that a distributed hash table has. There still needed to be a way to be able to host the apps and people to be incentivized. So with Ethereum, the end user actually pays for the transaction, and that's the same with Bitcoin and most of these proof of work, proof of stake mechanisms. But because computation is a lot cheaper and storage is a lot cheaper as well, that the app owner is the one that pays for their hosting in Holo tokens. So utility-wise, the Holo token, or it's on Ethereum right now. It's called HOT, H-O-T. I think it's ranked like number 70. It's just the app owner that's paying the hosting for everyone else, which I'm not sure what that's going to end up being like, but I don't think it's going to be very much. And that that hosting, obviously, I've mentioned that your phone you'll be able to specify if you want to earn a bit of hosting power, or earn some Holo tokens for being part of the P2P marketplace, hosting marketplace. Innovative crypto approach. Yeah, so that's the other thing. So I joined Ethereum to build a mutual credit system. At the time, I was part of the Brislets community and also part of the Mullany, not the credit union, the Mullany LET system, local energy trading, and it's basically an accounting system on. Think of a bunch of people bouncing up and down on trampolines in this room. People go up and down, and I really liked it because I think it solves welfare issues. I think that's a huge cost for our government. But if everyone just has an account that goes up or down, people who are going negative, that might have an issue or disabled, but at least we can see that we need to carry them. Or I see a better way, and that's a mutual credit system, and it's interesting that I feel like mutual credit's going to come back in a big way because of these technologies. But yeah, trying to build that on Ethereum, there was always this next hurdle, and then you always need to try and do this band-aid. You couldn't actually just do it on the public chain. And people tried to build a LET system on Ethereum, and it was just a failure. And then Holochain comes along, and they're building it. So it's great. So I think people's first experience, and especially you guys, your first experience of this, really the power of it will actually be going and making a hosting account with Holochain. And that experience will just literally be going to a website, probably I think it's holo.host, and putting an email and a password, and from that will create a unique identifier. And then that will be kind of like the passport that then allows you to go and interact with the rest of the ecosystem, unless you create a portal yourself. So learn more, you can go to Holochain. The next developers course is happening on the 18th to the 22nd of February. So yeah, if you're interested, there were a few people that weren't developers. It's just, if you want to just get deeper into it and understand it, it's a really good course to do. Any questions? That's it.
I have one. Just from listening to you and watching the YouTube video and the way out, I really feel with human sexual intelligence of this chatting. And I was wondering, is this more peer-to-peer, human-to-human, and less corporates. Like we've seen the corporates all get on the Ethereum and blockchain bandwagon. Are they likely to be getting on this, or is this going to be people?
I think it's just people. I think it's finally, it's the original Ethereum, it's the original Bitcoin promise and the original Ethereum promise, and now it's just being honed in. And actually, this is actually a human-centric thing. It's not an opinion of a database engineer and how he wants it all to run. This is actually people getting to choose exactly how they want it. So I just think it's a cat's out of the bag, and it's going to be really big, Holochain. And I thought Ethereum would be really big, and it was. Yeah.
You see, there's a comment here online which says that Bitcoin is a system of gathering and storing value, not a system of value creation or community engagement. I mean, this is Holochain enables many devices to participate in post-monetary society that values merit, contribution, community, and service to others.
Was that on Wikipedia, or was that?
No, this is just a regular focus.
Okay.
There's focus stick coming.
The other thing that I like is that so before Bitcoin and blockchain, they were building a project called the Metacurrency project, and so they're building this up. They couldn't run the Metacurrency project on the blockchain systems that are already existing. I think Arthur is actually from the Peer-to-Peer Foundation, or I know he's written a lot of articles from the peer-to-peer, as the Peer-to-Peer Foundation. And he's done a lot of sort of currency design work for governments and organisations around the world. And I just like his approach and his language, that he thinks the whole world can be shaped with language and currency. Because currency, and he always uses the currency, so being able to see the currency. So that's a big a big sort of like emphasis in Holochain that everyone should be able to see the money flows as well. And that, Kendrick and I could do our own private transactions, but if we actually want to build trust with a community or a region, we'd probably want to report our transactions to a shared bank account or some type of shared currency flow system, which the system can easily handle all that sort of stuff as well. So Metacurrency project is basically a project about all the share market side of things, like all the fluctuations and the poorer people losing out all the time because they freak out because the whales come in and manipulate the market. It's basically I see the Metacurrency project as putting a stop to all of that and a stop to fluctuating currencies. Because there's going to be this big, basically it's going to be, that's why they call it meta. It's a giant currency for the whole world, but it's actually the sum of all the small currencies in all the geological regions. The current technology wasn't able to sort of manage that type of, all the intricate relationships that would happen, and if a currency gets hit over here, then can other currencies, the sum of those, take the hit so that it's not a big hit for a whole ecosystem or something. It basically, what's holding Bitcoin and Ethereum back is its fluctuations. It's amazing, the fluctuation. So the idea is to put this global currency system on top of Holochain, the Metacurrency project. And then what I also loved was it's all about currency. So they have another project called Scepter, which has been going for many years. And Scepter is about seeing all these value flows. But more for the way our brain can process information. So we can see very clearly when we look at aquarium, we can see the state of things very quickly. And they're wanting to create these aquarium-like dashboards, very visual dashboards, so that you can look at the world and see the state of things in a sort of like a visual environment, so that you don't have to read, or it's more about symbols and signals on a screen. That naturally a human will be able to pick up and work out if the state of things is good or bad. Well, these two projects, Scepter and Metacurrency, these guys got together, which are the same people, and they went and created Holochain to be able to build Metacurrency, the Metacurrency project, and Scepter. And what's also really cool is on the developer course that I did last year. It was amazing. The most people that showed up were actually from Australia. We had the highest concentration. And so that's why the Holochain crew are actually coming to Australia in March to have a conference a 3-day conference about how we're going to share each other's work and move forward. So I just think it's going to move so much quicker than the other technologies.
Why was it mostly with Australian people?
I don't know, no idea. I think there's a big uptake of some of the people that believe in Holochain. They're all permaculture people as well. And so Bill Morrison, he's from Australia, so they clicked on to how nature works, and probably a few of the developers are aware of permaculture, and that's spread around the world as well. I just think that it's just no idea, but I think it's just some of us are really wise.
I'd like to just say a few things.
Yeah, go for it.
Your sense of importance is really good. I've been following the whole phenomenon for 22 years, since 1996, since the NSA data began in 1996. And there's a huge problem with the whole blockchain phenomenon, 51% problem straight away.
Yeah.
And the idea that a trustless world can exist fine between machines, but we're not machines.
Yeah.
And this whole idea that humans are machines is a very bad idea. It's for a long time needs to be called for what it is, and you're doing that.
Yeah.
Because you're making it human central, and that's fantastic. And you're developing trust. So the world runs on trust. You've got to develop trust, grow trust, build trust, and that's what you're doing. So that's great. I've got a couple of questions though. How is it different to a Git?
A Git?
Yeah.
I think they've taken Git.
Sorry?
I think it basically is Git.
Yeah,
it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
So is it different? It's probably not, is my answer.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Yeah, because the way that it goes and so one of the things, with Git, if it can create the same hash out of a set of code,
Yep.
That's all they're doing. They're using Git to create the hash, and we're just comparing hashes.
Yep.
And that's how we compare that we've got the same rules that we're going to interact by.
Yeah. Great, it's a great answer. It's no different, really.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, this is the same question you can put to blockchain and the whole blockchain phenomenon, is what's the problem it's solving? Because basically this is better than blockchain. I don't think, for me, in my opinion, there's not much doubt this is much better. So it's the future, but what's the problem it's solving? That's the question I'd like to put to you.
Good question.
Sorry?
Good question.
Yeah, because that's the whole question of blockchain.
You can donate money, and Visa, MasterCard can't stop it.
Well, I think I like just the whole mutual sovereignty ideas that Holochain.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. But is that solving a problem?
Yeah, but you can have neutral, sovereignty with SQL database.
You can, but you're trusting an engineer.
Life is about trusting people. So.
It's about
my life has been, I feel like I could trust more people when I was a kid, but as time has gone by, I can't trust as many people. So I feel like the trust in my life has been eroding, but I'm hopeful that that's going to come back.
I'm curious as to why the blockchain community crew isn't focusing on developing an RFC. I think it's a really important step, because when you think about the popularity of the internet and how these protocols that we rely on are based on these RFCs, and I think that will give it a certain amount of legitimacy to
What's an RFC?
Like an engineering.
I'm thinking like a request for communications.
No,
not an RFP.
The internet protocols.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm just curious as to why the blockchain community isn't pushing for that. Because we talk about SMTP, we talk about HTTP.
I know Ethereum uses UDP a little bit.
Yeah, but it's
like
not
Geth does, but yeah.
These are really defined protocols which, if you use them correctly, it works. You know what I mean? If you set up a HTTP server using the RFCs,
but you won't solve scalability problems just by setting up the RFC. You have the same technology problem.
I understand. Like, technology will be developed around those standards, though, is what I'm saying.
They do actually have at least like formulas.
Yeah, I think first you have
What
to.
they call it, I can't remember what they call it. It does actually have like a comment where you can make requests and if you looks at it.
Yeah.
It does. It had it.
I think first you have to solve the problem, and then you can make a standard out of it, but you won't solve the technology problem just by putting a stamp on it. Now it's a
I
standard.
actually don't believe there's a technology problem.
That theory would scale without problems. It wouldn't be a technology problem. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So this was just me playing around. This is a KYC process. And this is, so basically you've got the client or the customer. You've got two actors. You've got the KYC provider and you've got the customer. And so this is the start. I'll zoom in. So the client wants to be KYC'd. They visit a web page, they get authenticated. So what that means is they're proving that they're using their Holochain ID or whatever. They, generally KYC, this was just from my head, by the way, I was just going through the process. They need to upload a proof of address into the website. Then that's when finally a bit of information now finally gets sent to the next actor. The KYC provider checks the ID and the proof of address. And I just wanted to put this note here. I don't know what the KYC processes are completely, or the checks, but we need to go through. This is a note to go and check out all the KYC regulations and make sure that, what other logic do we need to put in there. So then it goes to a decision tree, and it's either yes, KYC is valid, or no, it's failed. Both get sent back to the client, so the client is cleared to begin investing, if it's to invest, or the client is notified that KYC failed, and it's the end of the line for them. Or client then moves to the next process, which might be the investing process. So then that goes to another logic map. So from there, you can kind of work out what your variables are, and you can also work out what your interfaces are. So if they visit a web page, it's going to be please log in to continue. If they're on this section of the step, it's going to be please upload a proof of address and ID. So they press the upload button. So you kind of can work out exactly what functions need to be created next from those buttons. So I can share this with people, and if you just want to experiment building your own apps and stuff like that, and I think that's the best way for people to sort of get started in designing whatever they want to build, and then we can work out and scope out how much time it's going to take to actually build, and then get a bunch of developers and finish it off. So I've sort of scoped out a process here, a little bit further up. So you basically define your user stories, you build your mocks and your business logic, you define your HAP logic. So here was just an example. I want to add one number and two numbers and press the submit button. So when you press the submit button, that's going to execute a function which is going to take two inputs. Number 1 and number 2. So from there you can work out what your variables are, variable A and variable B. So the first number to add and the second number to add, and then you're obviously going to have another variable which is whatever the current result is of that function. And then because there's only one button, you're basically going to only have one function in this little simple setup, unless that executes other functions. So you're taking two inputs and it's going to add two numbers, and then it's going to return the sum of A and B. And then set that result to the current result variable. And then so once that would be your custom Holochain logic. And then you're basically building your custom Holochain logic on top of other Holochain apps that other people have already built. So building a Holochain app won't be the whole lengthy process, 2 or 3 month process. It could be a 1 week process. Look, I just want a new button here in this existing Holochain app, and I just want to be able to add these two numbers. It's just going to be so much quicker. So that's kind of like how it gets going. That's it, guys.
Yeah, what I really like is the redundancy which you can adjust for the different applications, because if you have Ethereum or whatever blockchain at the moment, you have the same level of redundancy for a $10 billion transaction.
Yeah.
And a chat message to your mom, which doesn't make sense, which doesn't need the same level of security. And it will be just too costly to chat directly on blockchain.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. They call that the networking settings. In the whole development side of things. So you get to specify that.
As well, also helps with scalability and storage requirements, because I set up an Ethereum node, and it's just too costly, too time consuming, and if you want to have a full node, you have to have 2 terabytes of storage.
Yeah. And also just the effects to society. If you're going to use proof of work, it's pointless having a bunch of machines spending a lot of electricity just to save a tweet or save, a message or even a transaction, even a money transaction.
So what makes for